I got myself some goodies. Spool sliders, bar ends, front fork sliders, frame sliders. So today I will be working on the Ninja 400. I'm putting on a TST protection kit, and this bike, before I bought it, was in a crash, and they actually have a frame slider already on this side that I'll be removing, but they didn't have a frame slider on this side, which is where the wreck happened. It slid on this side. They had to replace this fairing. It's got some scratches back here, but not too bad. And so it's inevitable. You're gonna end up dropping your bike. It's part of owning a motorcycle. So I'm gonna take some preventative maintenance and add that protection kit to hopefully save some body damage in the future. Now with jobs like this, I like to have a checklist. So I've made a spreadsheet with a checklist of all the bolts and pieces that you need to remove. I've got torque specs because for frame sliders like this, it is important to use torque specs. So I will have a link in the description to this spreadsheet so that you can have this list for when you tackle this job. Another thing about a job like this motorcycle has lots of different parts and bolts, and so I like to use a parts tray to keep everything organized, and then the different size bolts won't get mixed up. I can make sure everything's back in the same place. Another way you can do this, if you don't have a parts tray, you can use Ziploc baggies and number them in the order that you took them off. And then in my spreadsheet, I have a column named PT, and that stands for parts tray. So you can number those in the checklist as you go through it so that you can keep track of that. And it is kind of cold outside in the garage right now, so I got my gloves on and a heater. Hopefully that doesn't make too much noise. So let's get started. I always wanted to do this. Hold on. I gotta take off my glove for that. Here we go. By the way, this video is not sponsored, and I bought all of this stuff with my own money. I'll be going in order of the amount of time it takes. So first thing is in the back, these spool sliders. On pretty much all motorcycles, these are just a bolt-on. It comes with everything that it needs, and you just bolt it right here to this hole. This did come with these large washers to place in between the spool and the frame so that the slider doesn't hit the swing arm, but I didn't like how it stuck out. It stuck out a little too far with a gap, so what I did instead, I took the original washer to put into here, and then I found a couple of spare washers that help it to fit a little better, so I can put those on. And then this is an M6. Gotta fix the lights. Now I don't remember a torque spec specified for these. I had these installed earlier since they were just so quick and easy to use. Just tighten them up, make sure they're snug, not too much. Just enough they're not coming off. And it's the exact same on the other side. Now, with these installed, I can use a motorcycle stand, which I'll be using for the rest of this video. It's just good for keeping the motorcycle upright and sturdy. There's not much movement. More sturdy than a kickstand. Next is the bar end here. This one is steel. I'm replacing it with this Womatech. It's got a sliding portion that is aluminum, so it should help better with sliding on the ground and not let the motorcycle take extra damage. This is also an M6. This has got Loctite on the original, but TST says that the Loctite isn't necessary for their bar ends. It's up to you if you want to use Loctite or not. So I'm just going to go without. These also do not have a torque spec, so just, again, make sure they're snug. They've got a bit of a stopping point. I've got a cramp buster on this side that I can just slide out of the way. Get this one out. Now on the throttle side, you want to make sure that this isn't so tight that it's going to hinder the throttle. You want to make sure that when you pull the throttle and let go, it springs back, just like normal. There we go. Now there's some light on there. Kind of makes everything else look dark though, but it's okay. Where did I put those? Oh, they're there. Here we go. All right, gonna be putting these on there. Let's check off the other two things. Okay. We're gonna be removing this locking pin here. You know what, I'm gonna change this. Here we go. Now we can get a nice, good close-up. All right, we're going to be taking out this locking pin. Gotta make sure it's straight, so it'll go through. Yeah. Come on. There we go. Let's see, this is a 24 millimeter. Do I have a 24? I gotta have a 24 somewhere. All right, if you don't have a 24, like I don't, then a 15/16 also matches. You should be good there. We can take this off nice and easy. All right, now that we have that off, you want to put the motorcycle stand on. All right, with the motorcycle stood up, we're going to be taking out the axle. So you want to get yourself an equivalent sized piece that you can fit in there to keep the wheel from falling down. Makes it easier for installation. I've just got this 1/2 inch extension right here that's pretty long. It's about the width of the axle. So we're going to go ahead and get that out nice and gently. And this is actually hanging up on this, so we'll just put it that far. It should be enough to where we can take this out and it won't fall down. We got that out now. Let's open these up. Now, these end caps are not side specific, but these bosses are. They've got a groove on the one that goes on the axle end right here. So you're going to slide that in, and then we can reinsert this axle. You got to lift the wheel a bit if it's not going in. And we can use the hammer the rest of the way. There we go. Nice light taps. We don't want to be denting anything. And let's just use this to go the rest of the way. All right, that's good enough. We don't want that too tight yet. Back on this side, we can put this other one on. This acts as the washer, so we won't need that old washer there. And I will actually not be able to fit this on with my motorcycle stand, so I'm going to be lowering that again. Now I can put this piece on, and when you buy these fork sliders, it will come with a new bolt to use. So you're not going to be using the kingpin bolt, but this new bolt that they've provided. Just thread it on by hand first, make sure it's not cross-threaded. Now we can take our torque wrench and tighten that to 72 foot-pounds. You do want to make sure this is torqued properly. Since this is the axle, you don't want this coming out. Make sure you're using the right torque. And this is an impact socket, which does not fit on here. So I will need to get another one. I found a 24 that does fit in there. So let's get that torqued down. Okay, I see our problem. We're going to want to take this and hold it on that side. Doo-doo-doo. This side is a 17 millimeter, so you want to take that. Put a wrench on it, go tighten. And now you can tighten it up. There we go. 72, we're good. Now we can put these end caps on. And these end caps are going to use 15 millimeter. TST says that you don't really need a torque spec for this, but they do give 10 foot-pounds as a reference. So I'll go ahead and use 10 foot-pounds. Really not much, but just want to make sure they're not going to come off. We are done with the front fork sliders. Now, while we're up front here, we've got these bolts here, and then some push pins like this. For these push fasteners, they've actually got a portion right here. You can stick a screwdriver in and push that in. That unlocks it. Then you can pry it out, and then when you're ready to reset it to put it back in, you can push that all the way out, and once that is pushed into the motorcycle, then you can push that flat, and that locks it. These are M4, and then 8 of these push fasteners. 1, 2, 3, 4. Same on the other side. Careful not to break them like I did. Now, with all the bolts out and the fasteners out, we can just pull this from the back side. And now pull inwards. And then pull it out. Now I'm going to remove this old slider that was on here when I bought the motorcycle. This is not factory, it was just on my motorcycle when I bought it. So I'm replacing it with a better one. For this next part, you're going to take your key, insert it here to take out the rear seat, with that removed, there is a cable right here that you're going to pull, and then you can lift your front seat out. With the seat removed, we can get to this bolt here, another bolt here to remove this side piece. These are M4. Now you can lift out from here. It's got clips all along the way, so you want to be careful. You can pull outwards this way. These have rubber grommets here to hold these in. Moving down to this bottom piece, we've got 2 more M4s and then an M5. Don't lose these plastic washers. They help protect the body. This one here has got a metal washer. Now you can remove this one side at a time if you take out one of the push fasteners here, but I'm gonna go to the other side and remove these other bolts that are the same on the opposite side. Now with all 6 of those bolts removed, we can lift this outwards. Then go back to the other side. And here we go, one piece. If you do want to take these out separately, it's got the push fastener right here on the front. Now here on the left side specifically, we've got 2 relays that are attached to this side panel. So we'll want to take those off before taking off this side fairing. This one's got a little hole inside it. If you have a poker tool like this, you can stick that in there, push that upwards, and it should slide off. There we go. Now we can do the same to the other. It's a bit harder to see. Take your time so you don't break anything. And there we go. And that one's off as well. Now this side fairing, it's got an M4 bolt here, and then 2 8mm bolts right there. We don't want to remove this bolt right here. This removes this black portion from this green portion, but we're just going to take this entire piece off. And there's one more push fastener right there. Now we can start here. Same thing as before, careful to not break anything. And then we will lift this upwards. Pull that out. Now we want to get to the blinker wire here and unplug that. And with that, the side fairing is off. I'll just remove this aftermarket piece. That's gonna need some persuasion. So I'm now realizing this is a California model and I need to relocate this fuel canister here. So we'll figure that out. All right, I did some more research and I figured out I can relocate the EVAP charcoal canister. That's what it's called. So I can take off this bracket and then zip tie it to the slider mount that's going to go here, and that should work out. So let's get working on that. If you don't have this EVAP canister, you can skip to the time code on the screen. These 2 bolts are 10mm. What am I doing? Much better. Now we're going to take off this bolt that holds in this piece, also a 10mm. Now we can unstrap this. We won't be needing this bracket anymore. And now what we'll do is we'll wait to reinstall this until after we've got this bracket mounted. So you can set this off to the side. Now, TST in this kit gives you 4 bolts that are going to be replacing the bolts that mount the engine. These 2 shorter bolts are going to be for the right side of the motorcycle, the opposite side. These two longer bolts are what we're going to be using on this left side here. They also provide us with these spacers that we're going to be inserting into these holes. These have an indicator on them of the rings that are on only one side. So this one would be spacer number 3. Spacer number 4 has no markings, and the two shorter spacers go on the right side of the motorcycle, 1 and 2. So make sure you have spacer 3 and 4 ready for this side. You're going to use your 14 millimeter to take out these bolts. You'll want to only do one engine mount at a time. We're going to do this rear one first. This is the middle engine mount, the middle of the bike. A magnet is really useful for this part. And on the left side, there are these spacers that go in between the engine mount and the engine. So you want to save these to reuse. These bolts, these original engine bolts, we are not going to be reusing for the mount. So you can do what you want with it. If you'd like to go back to original at some point, you can save these bolts. Otherwise, they're not needed anymore. There are the two longer bolts, the 120 and the 130 millimeter. You want to use the 120, the shorter bolt, for this rear mount. The left side mount has the bigger portion towards the front of the motorcycle. That's going to be the same for the right side of the motorcycle. And so what we want to do here, take that shorter bolt, insert it into this hole, take the number 3 spacer and slide it onto there. Then we're going to take that original spacer that came out and we're going to reinsert it into here and then slide the bolt through the hole. With these engine mount bolts, you want to make sure that they're threaded on by hand first so that you don't cross thread these bolts. These are very important bolts to not cross thread. These bolts are an M8. I'm not going to go too tight here because I want to make sure I have freedom to move this, but do make sure that this is snug so that the engine doesn't move. Now with this bolt in, we're going to remove this engine bolt. Again, the original spacer between the engine mount and engine, and we are not using the original bolt. Future me here, if you have the charcoal canister, when you have this bolt inserted, and this is swinging down, you won't have this yet, but make sure to place this in here with this pointing out so that you can slide this over top it. Save you some headache later. Take the number 4 spacer and insert that here. Now take the original spacer and the 130 millimeter bolt, the longest bolt. Raise this up, slide this in, and then put that spacer in. Thread it on by hand. That's not threaded on yet. And I can feel it cross-threading, so let's retry. This one doesn't feel quite right, so I'm going to gently tighten this. Make sure that it gets threaded properly, and I'm not cross-threading. I'm really not applying much pressure here, making sure to not cross-thread. And this feels sturdy, so now I'll go ahead and do it the rest of the way. Now we're going to save torquing these two bolts until after we put the slider on. Now you can grab 2 of the short bolts that they provide. These 4 bolts are all the same size, so you should be fine picking any 2. You want to grab your slider, make sure that the TST logo is pointing towards the rear of the motorcycle. Grab your M6 so you can slide that in there. And then you can screw on one. Now we can put in the other one. Grab your torque wrench for the slider and set it to 12 foot-pounds. Now we bolt these engine bolts at 32 foot-pounds. Now at this point, if you don't have the charcoal canister, it's going to be the exact same on the right side of the motorcycle. The number 1 spacer with the shorter bolt on the rear mount, and the number 2 spacer with the longer bolt on the front mount. Again, be sure to only do one mount at a time. You don't want the engine moving while you're installing these mounts. Now, if you have the charcoal canister like I do, I'm going to show you how I relocate this. The top portion of this is too wide to fit in between here. So I'm going to actually take off this bolt again so I can swing this and then slide this in, and then we'll re-bolt this. Unlike future me, you're going to follow those instructions so you don't have to retorque these twice. Now, with this in place, I'm going to take a long zip tie, and I'm going to use these 2 holes right here to zip tie the canister. And my zip tie is barely not long enough, so I'm going to have to get a second zip tie. Clip off that excess. Make sure that you are not putting the zip ties around this coolant hose right here. I guess I don't need to cut that. That's in there tight now. We're going to use another 2 zip ties to tie around vertically. Now I'm going to take this zip tie around the bottom, go in between this hose bracket and the hose back here, and then feed the zip tie between these 2 hoses. That should keep the zip tie on top, and then to keep this on bottom, we'll feed it through this. Make sure you don't go so tight that it ends up cutting into this hose. And now for this piece here, we want to make sure these hoses aren't kinked so that there's easy flow. I'm actually going to remove this hose. And then put it on the opposite side. Bend that back out so it's tight. All right, with that hose relocated, it's a little less tension around it. I think I'm going to zip tie it right here to this piece of the frame. There is this electrical wire that's right next to it that I'm actually going to feed the zip tie in between it, so I'm not putting that under any strain. I'm just putting it on this piece. I'm not putting it on any hoses or the wires back here, just this piece and the frame. That's nice and sturdy there. I'm not worried about that. And now the EVAP charcoal canister has been relocated. This right side is basically the same, minus the EVAP canister if you have that, and the relays here. So I'll just go through that quickly. Again, only take these engine mounts out one at a time. This rear mount on the right side is the number 1 spacer. There is no extra spacer in between the mount and the engine. And then the shorter bolt, threaded on by hand. Number 2 spacer, last bolt. 12 foot-pounds, 32 foot-pounds. Now with these side fairings off, it's a great time to take care of anything extra that you need with the fairings off. Like I have this motorcycle GPS tracker that I'm going to be hiding underneath the fairings so that it can't be easily found. You don't get to see where I hide it. Now we just reinstall the fairings. Nothing else needs torque specs, so just follow those steps in reverse. You don't want to over tighten these screws, otherwise it'll crack the plastic. So just screwing it in screwdriver style should be fine. When installing the side fairing, you want to keep in mind the blinker wire. I've got a DRL that I wired up, so I've got an extra wire to plug in. This is probably easier to reach your hand underneath. We'll do a quick test before we button everything up. We got the DRL and the blinker. There's these rubber grommets that some plastic tabs insert into. Make sure that those are pushed in. Sometimes if I feel like I'm cross-threading, I'll just put the bolt in the other hole and then go back to that one with another bolt. Again, this is plastic, so don't go too tight to crack it. With this side panel in, now I can put on these fuse boxes. You may need to use a screwdriver to push this tab in so that the tab can reach the hole down here. This has got a tab right here that needs to go into this hole, so you're gonna raise it up like this. It can be a little tricky. There we go. Get those tabs into the rubber grommets. The rubber grommets for this, there's one here, one here, one here, and one here. So for for this bottom piece, I probably made it more difficult than I needed to take it off. It's got this middle push tab that I'm gonna take out right now. That separates it into 2 halves, and then I can install it on each half. So for installing this, you're gonna want to bring it in, tilt it up, and then tilt it back downwards. Make sure that this front portion is coming on the outside. Remember, this has the 2 M4s on the front and then the M5 on the rear. Last thing to put in is the wheel well insert. I broke one of these push tabs, so I just have a pack of these laying around that are pretty similar. So I'll just grab one of those and use that instead. There's gonna be 4 push fasteners and then a screw on each side. There are tabs that hold it in flush with the edges. And then there's also 2 other screw holes that go into the fairings. Well, this video already turned out longer than I wanted it to, so I'm gonna end it here. That's the end of the TST upgrades. I've got one more bonus upgrade that I'm gonna cover in the next video. So subscribe and I'll see you there.